joined by Dr. Kathy Marshack, PhD, who is a licensed psychologist, and she is the author of a fascinating book called Life with a Partner or Spouse with Asperger Syndrome, Going Over the Edge, Practical Steps to Saving You and Your Relationship. Dr. Marshack, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, good to have you.
Thrilled to have you. We both enjoyed your book and loved different things about it.
Yes. I love the way you took actual case studies. Tell us about that. Did you take people from your practice and you utilize their stories as part of this book?
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, obviously I want to protect people's privacy, so I might have changed some data in the story to make sure that nobody was, their privacy was invaded. But yes, these are real stories, people that I work with, even people in my own personal life. And as we were talking about earlier, I do have family members on the spectrum.
Yes, tell us about that, your family members on the spectrum.
Well, the first one for me to recognize was my daughter, and I was trying to figure out, this is kind of what got me into this field, is I'm a psychologist, but that doesn't mean I know anything about autism. And then when it became personal, when my daughter was 13, I realized that's what was going on. And I had taken her to many, yeah, there she is.
Oh, okay.
I'd taken her to lots of people for asking for what to do, but nobody could identify what it was. And when I finally said, I think this might be Asperger's at the time, high functioning autism, then I started getting some traction. And then I figured out that my mother probably was on the spectrum, as were a number of relatives prior to anybody being able to diagnose them.
How interesting is that?
So that must have given you enormous empathy for some of the people that you were working with, having come from this background and having personal experience.
It really woke me up. It really woke me up to what was going on. And, I was obviously late as a parent, finding out that my daughter was at 13, that fit, and then doing my best to read things and talk to people and try to figure out what I could do to, make up for lost time.
Well, what I love is that what that has led to is you writing so eloquently, and this is not the only book, but you write not for the individuals so much on the spectrum, but for the neurotypical people in their lives, to give them a roadmap to be able to understand what's happening when things don't work, when communication doesn't work, and to find ways to maintain the relationship through that issue, which I think is powerful.
Yeah, I'm often telling people that I'm not an expert on autism by any means. I'm an expert on living with autistic family members and, breaking down the myths and the barriers and the crazy stuff that goes on. One of the reasons that people write to me when they read that book is they say, how did you know I was living with this? And it's primarily the loneliness. It's the trying to connect and communicate and break through to somebody you care deeply for, and it just isn't working.
Absolutely. Now, you love the case studies. I like those too, but I'll tell you, my favorite part of this book is that at the end of each chapter, you have a section called Lessons Learned. And it's sort of the Reader's Digest, like I kind of want them on flashcards to take with me, because it's some of the best advice for any relationship. No matter who the relationship is between. They're really fabulous guideposts that a lot of us probably either take for granted sometimes, but they would be a great thing for a couple to talk through and have discussion tips with. Really powerful stuff. There's one chapter in here in particular where you talk about sex and say sex is not a commodity. I wanted to find what the title of it was. And as I'm reading through these lessons learned, there's, I don't know if you saw, it was an award-winning film this last year, won at Sundance, a documentary called Dina, about a woman on the spectrum who recently got married. I want to send this to her. Both people who got married are on the spectrum, but I want to send your book to her, because it would help them so much. Are you familiar with the film?
I'm not familiar with the film, but I certainly have had a number of people, spectrum people, ask me about things like this because both your what I write about is this connecting piece, their struggle with the connecting, whether it's sex or love or teaching your child something. We just take for granted, neurotypicals or non-spectrum people take for granted that the first step is connecting, but that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Sometimes the connecting has to look a lot different if you're going to reach that person.
Right.
If that makes sense.
It totally makes sense.
You take the point of view of the neurotypical spouse or parent in each of these case studies. Is that correct?
I do. I think it's a part of the puzzle that hasn't been addressed very much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the non-spectrum partner, the mom or the dad or the caretaker person is often viewed as needing to learn a lot about autism, which is true, but then their needs are not taken into the picture. You know, how do they feel when their sex is a commodity, you know, when it's just an act as opposed to this is a loving connection with someone that I care about. It's very lonesome in these relationships for neurotypicals. It's very lonesome.
It is very lonesome. And what do you think, which is kind of disturbing that there are so many inherent problems. So do you have generally a positive feeling about these relationships? And do you find that most of them need some sort of therapy?
Oh dear, I don't know if most of them do. You got to realize the people that come to my office say they do.
Right.
They want some help. I'm not sure that that's true for everybody, but the people that I'm seeing are feeling lonesome, confused, distraught. They don't understand the kinds of questions or the way that an autistic person will organize the data. I was telling one of my high-functioning autistic clients, I said, well, you think about people, you care about the people in your life, but you're not necessarily considering them as you're organizing the data in your life. Does that make sense? It's separate.
Right.
And because it's separate, people get the impression that you don't value them or that they're not important to you. And he said, but they are. And he said, boy, I sound selfish. And I said, well, yeah, that's how it would sound to the neurotypical, or that's how it would feel. But it's not true that obviously he loves them, he cares, he would do anything for them. But the way you communicate to each other is extremely important, and neurotypicals expect that they're going to be considered first in any interaction.
And that's an unrealistic expectation. Even as I hear you say that, I think that's unrealistic.
It is unrealistic. It's not going to happen. And if you feel dashed every time, that's not going to work. So I was just one of the examples I use in this book. I believe it's this book. It could be my second book. I wrote a book on parenting with the partner as well. My 16-year-old autistic daughter was starting to get all upset because I had come home from the store and had not brought her favorite snack for her. And I was just asking my two daughters to please help me put the groceries away. And she was just saying, I can't believe you I don't think I can handle it. You didn't bring this food that I was expecting. So I said to her, why don't you go to your room and listen to some music for a while? And Phoebe and I'll put the groceries away. And Bianca said, I don't think that's going to work. And I said, well, give it a try. Just go see. You love music. Go to your room. When you feel better and you want to come back, you come back. But go ahead. I believe in being honest. And so with my daughter, my younger daughter, when she was complaining, I said, Phoebe, would you want to have the problems your sister has?
Oh, yeah.
And she looked at me and she said, no. And she stopped arguing. I said, it's better that we give her a break. So the problem is, of course, parents with the neurotypical child are saying, how come that child isn't getting the same break?
Yeah.
But she does. Phoebe has friends. Phoebe played soccer. Phoebe didn't have the trouble in school that her big sister did.
Yeah,
Mhm.
But
there's no
parenting two
comparison.
different children is not so easy to do.
No, I
Not
can imagine.
Not at all. So now we've just got a couple of minutes left. Talk to us about radiant empathy.
This is great. This is in my last book, which doesn't have a positive title. It's called When Empathy Fails, How to Stop Those Hell-Bent on Destroying You. And it sounds like a terrible thing. But what I keep going toward is the way to deal with if it's an autistic person or if it's somebody else who has an empathy disorder, if you build up your ability to be empathic, if you take good care of yourself, if your boundaries are clear, if you can say no when somebody really is not, being kind to you, not taking care of your, not being respectful of you, there's a lot of things that go into being a radiantly empathetic person. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling. I'm trying to rush here. There's a lot of things that go into that, but I think that's healing. I think that makes it possible to deal with people who have trouble connecting. Autistic people do have trouble connecting. They don't recognize the signals, but generally their heart's in the right place, just like when I asked my daughter to go downstairs and listen to music. She didn't want to have a meltdown. She didn't want to be difficult, but she knew she wasn't able to manage her feelings right then. So if you have radiant empathy, you get that. You give the other person that break, and then you step back and recognize all the love that's coming into your life in these relationships. But it's a lot of work.
Well, it is. I mean, just the idea of being able to be kind and have empathy for people, but not compromise your boundaries, that's like crazy talk to me. I want to know more about how you do that. I'm going to have to get that book. Because don't you find that's the hard thing as a mother? It's, I can have empathy for somebody. I'm very good at that. But preserving my own boundaries while doing it
is very difficult.
Woo! That's just crazy talk there, Dr. Marshack.
Especially
we'll have to get that one.
They're pushing your boundaries all the time anyway.
Yeah.
And if you're a mom or a dad, or the significant person in this child's life or this adult's life, they really are counting on you a lot. I was talking to some parents just this morning about their child who's doing all kinds of out-of-the-box destructive things. And I said, it's all on your shoulders. Mm-hmm. Teachers are helping you. Speech pathologist is helping you. There's other, folks in your life. But every day you're the one who needs to keep helping your child feel good about himself.
Yep.
And yet feel good about yourself. Know that you're a valuable human being, and you've got lots going for you. You're going to know more about how to be a human being than the average person, frankly, when you're in these relationships.
Wow.
Well, thank you, Dr. Marshack. And once again, you can get your books on Amazon.
Yep.
We want to recommend them for parents and spouses of those with Asperger Syndrome.
And for more information, go to kmarshack.com.